Now to this. As he stares down the latest firestorm to engulf his White House, President Trump is not backing down from the controversy. Instead, he is doing something very familiar, pointing the finger elsewhere. The current target? Former Vice President Joe Biden and his son Hunter, who Trump claims engaged in corruption in Ukraine. Now, he has made that claim not just to the American public over the last couple of days, but also directly to Ukraine's president during a phone call late in July. A phone call that took place the day after Robert Mueller testified to Congress, which also happened to be the same day when Trump came out and cried again, no collusion, said he was totally vindicated from any accusations he conspired with Russia in the 2016 presidential election. So the day after, he's on the phone with the president of Ukraine. And despite President Trump's insistence to the contrary, Ukraine's prosecutor says that there is no evidence of wrongdoing by Joe Biden or his son. So CNN's Caitlin Collins is our White House correspondent. She is there at the United Nations here in New York, where we know President Trump made a speech today on religious freedom. But on this topic, the president said he wanted the public to see the call's transcript. Is he changing his mind?
He seems to be wavering on it, Brooke, because he's gone back and forth over whether or not that transcript should be released, because he says it would reveal that he's right here, that there was no wrongdoing or inappropriate conversations during that call. But just a few moments ago, the president was again talking about this topic, and he seemed to then be echoing what we've heard from aides, that they're worried if they did release this transcript, it could lead to them to being forced to release a slew of others.
Sure, you can authorize release the transcript. Will you do that,
I can
sir?
do it very easily, but I'd rather not do it from the standpoint of all of the other conversations I have. I may do it because it was a very innocent call on both his part and mine. We had a very nice call. It was really a congratulatory call because he had just won. It was just confirmed, and he's the new president. And
Now, Brooke, as they're wrestling with whether or not they should release the transcript, Democrats say they have no choice but to release the whistleblower's complaint, saying that if it goes to the Inspector General, who has deemed it urgent, then it must be released to these intelligence committees, which so far, of course, they've said it has not gone so far. We've heard people go back and forth over that precedent that would set, but they say, no, it's the law. You have to release this complaint. So that's what people are waiting to see. But as that's going on, the president is insisting he did not threaten to withhold that aid for Ukraine, that military aid that they needed for protection from Russia, as he was pushing them to talk about Joe Biden, pushing Joe Biden during these phone conversations with the Ukrainians, as the president himself has confirmed. But now another thing, focusing on that whistleblower's complaint, Brooke, the president on Twitter is questioning this person's patriotism. Even though on Friday he said he didn't know what the identity of this person is, he was asking earlier on Twitter whether or not they are on the country's side.
And it sounds like we're hearing from a range of reactions from Trump's inner circle over this whole thing. What, Caitlin, ranging from, worried to, I read one White House official brushed it off, calling it Mueller 2. We've seen this movie before. Tell me more.
And that's what the president said earlier when he was asked if he's worried about these renewed calls for his impeachment, which we may start to see new calls from Democrats who haven't gone that far yet. He said he wasn't. He said he felt like this was a redo of the Mueller investigation, which of course he's declared vindication on, though those were not exactly the results of it. But it's going back and forth in the White House because there are some people who do see this as a problem for the president to be talking to another foreign leader about investigating his political rival, even though aides have denied that the president was pressuring him during those phone calls. But that's really the concern. So it is a mixed bag inside the White House. Okay. They're waiting to see what Republicans are going to say about this and whether or not it's going to become a bigger issue for Trump.
Okay. We'll talk about what Republicans are saying or not saying in this next conversation I'm about to have. Caitlin, thank you very much. Down at the UN, the pressure may be mounting for House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. CNN has learned that the Ukraine call has pushed some House Democrats to what one lawmaker says is the tipping point on impeachment after they were opposed to it in the past. My next guest left the Republican Party nearly 1 year ago after the Kavanaugh confirmation hearing, saying Republicans had become a threat to the rule of law and constitutional norms. He says that if it is true that President Trump tried to get the Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden, that the president should be impeached and removed from office. And now he is Tom Nichols, and he is the author of The Death of Expertise. And in a new column for The Atlantic, he writes about Trump's Ukraine call. The headline is, "If this isn't impeachable, nothing is." Tom Nichols, welcome, sir. Pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
You tweeted Saturday, quote, "I have never made the case for impeaching Trump despite my belief that he has long merited impeachment." What made you want to write this now?
Because this is the most clear case of impeachable behavior. I understand that people read the Mueller report. They didn't understand why some of the things that happened in the Mueller report were impeachable. Obstruction is a legal argument that I think the president and his advisors have successfully obfuscated. The only issue here is, did the president of the United States ask a foreign leader to investigate an American citizen for his own personal political purposes? When I wrote it, I said, if that's true, now the president has essentially confirmed that. I think we're about one or two press conferences away from the president simply confirming that there was a quid pro quo as well.
You think so?
This is simply an abuse of power. He already said, well, you don't want to give money to somebody who's corrupt. And I think it's really important to point out that if you're waiting for $250 million in aid and the president says, apropos of nothing, here's this thing I really care about and I'd like you to do, that sure would, if I were a foreign leader, I would understand the clarity of that message. But even without that, even without the whistleblower complaint, if the president asked for one of his opponents to be put in legal jeopardy in a foreign country to serve his own personal interests, I don't understand how that's not impeachable, to be honest.
So I hear you loud and clear. Does this mean then that these hearings, impeachment hearings, would be inevitable, not just for Trump, but also for Speaker Pelosi, who thus far has really resisted calls for it?
I don't speak for Speaker Pelosi or the U.S. government or anyone else. I guess my only question to the Democrats is, if not this, what? I mean, at this point, if this is not impeachable behavior, then maybe we ought to just strip that part right out of the Constitution and forget about it. Now, I know that the answer for a lot of Democrats is, well, the Senate will never convict. But at some point, there is a constitutional duty to engage in this and to put the Senate on record as either approving this kind of behavior or rejecting it. And I don't think that this should just become a raw calculation about how many votes there are in the Senate. Remember, impeaching Richard Nixon was actually quite unpopular in 1973 and didn't hit the 50% mark until the summer of 1974. I just think the behavior itself is so obvious, and the president has copped to it. I mean, he simply said point blank, we're never going to see that transcript, by the way, and if we do, I'm not sure I would trust the version that comes out of the White House.
I was going to ask you about that. Let me read. We'll get to
the president has said I brought it up with him, so I believe him.
Yeah, color me cynical, but I hear you loud and clear on that. Let me read part of your piece. You write, "There is no spin, no deflection, no alternative theory of the case that can get around the central fact that President Trump reportedly attempted to use his office for his own gain and that he put the foreign policy and the national security of the United States at risk while doing so." You go on, by comparison, Watergate was a complicated judgment call. And Tom, yet the Republican Party probably won't call this out. What do you think?
Well, it's remarkable to me. Senator Romney made one mildly critical. He said it would be troubling in the extreme.
Would be troubling. Hasn't Trump admitted it?
It would be troubling in the extreme if this were true. And already, there are other Republicans walking away from him. I mean, Senator Hawley has already started with, this is a deep state attack. And as you pointed out, Republicans working in the White House are saying, well, this is just Mueller too, and no one cares. I think I would hope that there is some remnant of the Republican Party that actually cares about the Constitution and national security. But if I believe that, I'd still be a Republican, and I'm not.
Tom Nichols, powerful piece in The Atlantic. Thank you so much for coming on. We'll talk again. Thank you.
Thank you.